Ever wonder why your avocado tree looks like a lush green jungle, but never seems to actually produce any fruit? You water it, you fertilize it, you give it plenty of sun, and yet year after year you end up with this beautiful ornamental tree and nothing to show for it at the table. You are not alone. This is one of the most common frustrations I hear from gardeners, and in this video I'm going to walk you through the complete process of growing avocados for maximum fruit production, not just maximum leaves. We are going to cover everything from choosing the right variety to planting, watering, fertilizing, pruning, and even the pollination secret that most people completely overlook. Plus, stick around to the end, because I have got a bonus tip that involves a simple kitchen scrap technique that can actually boost your tree's fruit set dramatically. Let's get into it. Avocados are one of the most rewarding fruit trees you can grow in your garden. There is nothing quite like walking outside and picking a perfectly ripe avocado right off your own tree. And here is the good news. Once you understand how these trees actually work and what they need to shift from vegetative growth into fruit production, you can start harvesting your own avocados consistently. So let's start by understanding how avocado trees grow and why that matters for getting fruit. Now, before we get into the steps, I want to explain something that is going to make everything else in this video make a lot more sense. Avocado trees are not like tomatoes or peppers where you plant them and a few months later you are harvesting. Avocados are a long game. If you are growing from a grafted nursery tree, which I highly recommend, and we will talk about why in a minute, you are looking at about 3 to 4 years before you see your first fruit. If you grew yours from a pit, and I know a lot of you did, because it is fun and easy, you might be waiting 7 to 15 years, and there is no guarantee the fruit will be any good. I do not say that to discourage you. I say it because understanding this timeline is going to help you make better decisions right now that will pay off down the road. Avocado trees also have a unique flowering system that directly affects how much fruit you get, but we will get into that when we talk about pollination. For now, just understand that avocados want to grow leaves. That is their default setting. Our job is to guide them toward putting energy into fruit instead. And we do that through variety selection, proper watering, smart fertilizing, strategic pruning, and making sure pollination actually happens. So let's start with the very first decision you need to make. Choosing the right variety is probably the single most important decision you will make, and it is also where a lot of people go wrong right from the start. Now, if you live in zones 9 through 11, you have got the most options. That is where avocados really thrive. If you are in zone 8, or even the warmer parts of zone 7, you can still grow avocados, but you need to be very selective about cold-hardy varieties. The most common variety you will see is the Hass, and for good reason. Hass avocados have that rich, creamy texture and nutty flavor that most people think of when they think of avocados. They are a type A flowering variety, which is going to matter when we talk about pollination. Hass does well in zones 9 through 11 and can handle temperatures down to about 28 degrees Fahrenheit for short periods once established. If you are in a cooler area, look at varieties like Mexicola or Bacon. Mexicola is incredibly cold-hardy, handling temperatures down to about 18 degrees Fahrenheit, which is remarkable for an avocado. The fruit is smaller with a thin, edible skin and a more intense flavor. Bacon is another cold-tolerant option that can handle the low 20s and produces medium-sized fruit with a milder taste. Now here is something really important. You want to buy a grafted tree from a reputable nursery, not grow one from a pit. I know. Growing an avocado from a pit is one of those classic gardening projects. I have done it myself plenty of times. But here is the reality. A pit-grown avocado is a genetic gamble. It will not be true to the parent fruit, and it can take over a decade to produce anything, if it ever does. A grafted tree, on the other hand, is cloned from a proven producer. You know exactly what kind of fruit you are going to get. and you will get it years sooner. The extra $30 to $50 you spend on a quality grafted tree is going to save you years of waiting and wondering. One more thing on variety selection. Pay attention to tree size. Some avocado varieties can grow 40 feet tall or more if left unpruned. If you have limited space or want to keep your tree manageable for harvesting, look for dwarf or semi-dwarf varieties like Little Cado or Wurtz, which stay in the 8 to 10-foot range. You can also keep standard varieties smaller through pruning, which we will cover later. Now that you have got your tree, let's talk about getting it in the ground the right way. Where and how you plant your avocado tree is going to set the foundation for everything else. First, location. Avocados need full sun, and I mean real full sun, at least 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. But 8 or more is better. In my experience, the more sun they get, the more fruit they produce. If you are in a really hot climate, like the desert Southwest, a little afternoon shade can actually help prevent leaf burn. But for most of us, maximum sun exposure is what we are after. Now here is where a lot of people run into trouble. Avocados have very sensitive root systems, and they absolutely cannot tolerate wet feet. If your soil stays soggy after a rain, your avocado tree is going to struggle and eventually die from root rot. This is probably the #1 killer of backyard avocado trees. You need well-draining soil, and I cannot stress this enough. If you have heavy clay soil like I do in parts of my garden, you have got a couple of options. You can plant on a mound, raising the root zone 6 to 12 inches above the surrounding grade. This lets excess water drain away from the roots. You can also amend the planting area heavily with coarse organic material like bark mulch or well-aged wood chips to improve drainage. Or, and this is what I recommend, if you have really challenging soil, you can grow your avocado in a large container. A 25 to 50 gallon container works well, and it gives you complete control over the soil conditions. When you dig your hole, make it about twice as wide as the root ball, but no deeper. You want the top of the root ball to sit slightly above the surrounding soil level, maybe an inch or so. This helps prevent water from pooling around the trunk, which can cause crown rot. Backfill with native soil mixed with some compost, but do not go crazy with the amendments. You want those roots to eventually grow out into your native soil, so a 50-50 mix is plenty. One thing I do with every avocado I plant is create a watering basin around the tree. I build up a ring of soil about 2 to 3 feet out from the trunk that is maybe 4 inches high. This creates a basin that holds water and lets it slowly soak down to the roots. As the tree grows, I gradually extend this basin outward to encourage the roots to spread. Do not add fertilizer at planting time. I know it seems like you are giving your tree a boost, but newly planted trees need to focus on establishing roots, not pushing new growth. Fertilizer can actually burn tender new roots and stress the tree. We will talk about when and how to fertilize in a few minutes. Now let's talk about watering, and I want you to really pay attention here because this is where most people either underwater or overwater their avocados, and both will cost you fruit. Avocados are a bit of a paradox when it comes to water. They need consistent moisture, but they cannot sit in wet soil. Think of it like this. You want the soil to be like a wrung-out sponge, moist throughout, but not dripping wet. This is especially critical in the first 2 years, while the tree is getting established. For a newly planted tree, I water deeply 2 to 3 times per week during the warm months, depending on the weather and soil conditions. What I mean by deeply is letting a slow trickle of water run for about 30 to 45 minutes so it really soaks down into the root zone. Shallow, frequent watering encourages shallow roots, and shallow roots mean a tree that struggles during dry spells and produces less fruit. Once your tree is established, which takes about 2 to 3 years, you can back off to once or twice a week during the growing season. Mature trees have extensive root systems that can pull moisture from a wider area. In the winter, you can water even less frequently, maybe every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on rainfall. Now here is a trick I use to know when to water. I dig down about 6 inches into the soil near the edge of the canopy and feel the moisture level. If it is dry at that depth, it is time to water. If it is still moist, I wait another day or two. You can also use a moisture meter if you want to take the guesswork out of it. They cost about $10 to $15 and are worth every penny. Mulching is absolutely essential for avocados. I apply a thick layer of coarse organic mulch, about 4 to 6 inches deep, in a wide ring around the tree. Keep the mulch about 6 inches away from the trunk itself to prevent moisture buildup against the bark. This mulch layer does 3 important things. It keeps the soil consistently moist, it regulates soil temperature, and it feeds the tree as it breaks down. Avocados naturally grow in environments with a thick layer of leaf litter on the ground, so we are mimicking their natural conditions. One more thing about watering. If your water is high in salts or minerals, which is common in many areas, those salts can build up in the soil and burn the leaf edges. You will see brown, crispy tips on the leaves. The solution is to do a deep leaching every month or so during the growing season. This just means running water through the soil for an extended period, maybe an hour more, to flush those accumulated salts down below the root zone. By the way, if you are finding this helpful so far, take a second to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you do not miss future videos. All right, let's keep going. Now let's talk about fertilizing, and this is where we really start steering the tree toward fruit production instead of just leaf production. Avocados are heavy feeders, but they need the right nutrients at the right times. If you dump a bunch of high nitrogen fertilizer on your tree, you are going to get exactly what you do not want: a massive flush of vegetative growth with very little fruit. Nitrogen promotes leaves and stems. Phosphorus and potassium promote roots, flowers, and fruit. We need to balance these carefully. For young trees in their first 2 to 3 years, I use a balanced citrus and avocado fertilizer with roughly equal amounts of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Something like a 666 or an 888 works well. Apply it 4 times per year, in late winter, late spring, midsummer, and early fall. Follow the package directions for amounts based on the age and size of your tree. Once your tree starts producing fruit, usually around year 3 or 4 for a grafted tree, you want to shift your fertilizer strategy. Now I reduce the nitrogen and increase the phosphorus and potassium. I look for fertilizers with a ratio more like 4:8:8 or similar, where that middle and last number are higher. This tells the tree to put its energy into flowering and fruit development rather than pumping out more leaves. One nutrient that avocados need in higher amounts than most fruit trees is zinc. Zinc deficiency is really common in avocados and shows up as small, narrow leaves with yellow mottling between the veins. I apply a zinc sulfate foliar spray twice a year, once in early spring and once in midsummer. You can find zinc sulfate at most garden centers, and a little goes a long way. Mix about 1 tablespoon per gallon of water and spray it directly on the leaves on a cool morning. The leaves absorb it quickly, and you will see the difference within a few weeks. I also like to add a layer of well-aged compost around my avocado trees once or twice a year. This is not a replacement for fertilizer, but it adds organic matter to the soil, feeds the beneficial microbes, and provides a slow release of nutrients over time. I spread about 2 to 3 inches of compost in a ring from about a foot away from the trunk out to the drip line of the tree. Think of it as a nutrient savings account that the tree can draw from whenever it needs to. One thing I have learned the hard way is to avoid fertilizing late in the season. If you push a bunch of new growth in fall, that tender growth is going to be vulnerable to cold damage over the winter. I stop fertilizing by early September in my Zone 9 garden. If you are in a warmer area, you might be able to push that a bit later. But generally speaking, let the tree harden off naturally heading into the cooler months. Now let's get into pruning, and this is a topic that makes a lot of people nervous. I get it. You have waited years for this tree to grow, and now I am telling you to cut parts of it off. But strategic pruning is one of the best things you can do to maximize your avocado yield, and I am going to explain exactly why and how. First, let me tell you why we prune avocados. Left to their own devices, avocado trees will grow tall and narrow, putting most of their fruit way up at the top, where you cannot reach it without a ladder or a very long picking pole. The interior of the tree becomes shaded and unproductive, and you end up with a tree that is difficult to manage and harvest. By pruning, we keep the tree at a manageable height, encourage branching that opens up the canopy to light and air, and redirect the tree's energy into fruit production at a level where we can actually reach it. The best time to prune avocados is in late winter or early spring, just before the new growth flush begins. This gives the tree the whole growing season to recover and fill in. Avoid pruning in fall or early winter because the cuts leave the tree vulnerable to cold damage. Here is my approach. For young trees in their first few years, I focus on shaping. I want to create a strong, open framework of 3 to 4 main scaffold branches, coming off the trunk at different heights and angles. I remove any branches that are crossing, rubbing, or growing straight up or straight down. I also remove any suckers that pop up from the base of the tree or from the rootstock below the graft union. Once the tree is established and producing fruit, my pruning goals shift. Now I am focused on keeping the tree at a height I can manage, which for me is about 12 to 15 feet. Every year I take the top of the tree down to my target height. This seems aggressive, but avocados respond really well to this kind of heading cut. They will push out new growth below the cut, and that new growth will flower and fruit. I also thin out the interior of the canopy to let light penetrate. Avocados flower and fruit on the previous year's growth, so you want sunlight reaching those interior branches. Remove any dead or dying wood, any branches that are growing back toward the center of the tree, and any weak, spindly growth that is not going to support fruit anyway. One thing I want to mention is that avocados have what we call alternate bearing tendency. This means they tend to produce a heavy crop one year and a lighter crop the next. Pruning can actually help moderate this cycle. After a heavy fruit year, I prune a bit more aggressively to reduce the number of potential flowering sites. This helps the tree put more energy into fewer fruit, which often results in better quality and a more consistent crop year to year. Do not be afraid to prune. I have seen people let their avocado trees grow 30 feet tall because they were scared to cut them. Now they have a tree that produces plenty of fruit, but it all falls and smashes on the ground before they can get to it. A well-pruned tree at a manageable height is going to give you more usable fruit than a towering giant ever will. Now we need to talk about pollination, and this is the secret that most people completely overlook. You can do everything else right, and if you are not thinking about pollination, you might still end up with a beautiful tree and very little fruit. Here is how avocado flowers work, and I promise, this is simpler than it sounds. Avocado trees are not like most fruit trees where the flower opens, a bee comes along, pollinates it, and fruit develops. Avocados have what scientists call synchronous dichogamy, which is a fancy way of saying their flowers open twice at different times of day, once as female and once as male. There are 2 types of avocado trees based on their flowering pattern, type A and type B. Type A varieties, which include Hass, Pinkerton, and Reed, have flowers that open as female in the morning and then close. The next afternoon, those same flowers reopen as male and release pollen. Type B varieties, which include Fuerte, Bacon, and Zutano, do the opposite. Their flowers open as female in the afternoon and as male the following morning. Now here is why this matters for your fruit production. If you only have one avocado tree, there may be very little overlap between when the female flowers are receptive and when pollen is available. This is especially true in cooler weather, when the flowering cycle can get even more out of sync. The result is poor pollination and low fruit set, even on a tree that is covered in flowers. The solution is to plant at least 2 avocado trees, one type A and one type B. When you have both types, there is much better overlap between male and female flower stages throughout the day, and you get dramatically better pollination and fruit set. In my garden, I have 3 avocado trees, 2 Hass, which are type A, and 1 Fuerte, which is type B. The difference in fruit production compared to when I had just a single tree is remarkable. Now I know what some of you are thinking. I only have room for 1 tree. What do? There are a few options. First, if your neighbors have avocado trees within 100 feet or so, their pollen can actually help pollinate your tree, especially if they happen to have the opposite flowering type. Bees can travel that distance easily. Second, you can graft a branch of the opposite type onto your existing tree. This gives you both flowering types on one tree, and it is actually not as difficult as it sounds. There are plenty of tutorials out there on how to do this. Third, you can hand pollinate by collecting pollen from the male phase flowers and transferring it to the female phase flowers using a small brush. This is labor-intensive, but it works if you are really committed. One thing that helps pollination, regardless of how many trees you have, is making your garden attractive to bees. Avocado flowers are not the flashiest blooms in the garden, so bees need a reason to visit. I plant plenty of flowering herbs and annual flowers near my avocado trees to draw pollinators into the area. Lavender, rosemary, salvias, and zinnias are all great choices. The bees come for those flowers and end up visiting the avocado blossoms while they are in the neighborhood. Let's move on to harvesting, because knowing when and how to pick your avocados is just as important as everything else we have covered. Here is something that surprises a lot of new avocado growers. Avocados do not ripen on the tree. You can leave an avocado hanging on the tree for months after it has reached maturity, and it will stay hard as a rock. Ripening only happens after you pick the fruit. The tree is essentially acting as a storage system, which is actually pretty convenient once you understand it. So how do you know when an avocado is ready to pick? It comes down to size, appearance, and time. First, the fruit should have reached full size for its variety. For a Hass, that is about 5 to 12 ounces. The skin color also changes as the fruit matures. Hass avocados go from a bright green to a darker, more purplish green when mature. Other varieties may stay green even when mature, so color is not always a reliable indicator. The best way to test if your avocados are ready is to pick one and let it sit at room temperature for about a week to 10 days. If it ripens evenly and tastes good, the rest of the fruit on the tree is probably ready too. If it shrivels, stays rubbery, or tastes bitter or watery, it was picked too early, and you should wait another few weeks before trying again. In my Zone 9 garden, Hass avocados are typically ready to start picking in late spring, around April or May, and the harvest window extends all the way through fall. I do not pick them all at once. I pick what I need every week or two, and the rest stays fresh on the tree. This is one of the great things about avocados. They are practically self-storing. When you pick, use a clipper or pruning shears to cut the stem about a 1/4 inch above the fruit. Do not pull or twist the fruit off because you can damage the branch and create an entry point for disease. Handle the fruit gently to avoid bruising. To ripen avocados indoors, just leave them on the counter at room temperature. They will be ready in about 4 to 7 days, depending on the temperature. If you want to speed things up, put them in a paper bag with a banana or apple. Those fruits release ethylene gas, which accelerates ripening. If you want to slow things down, put mature avocados in the refrigerator. They will hold for a week or two without ripening much further. Now let's talk about some common problems you might run into and how to solve them, because even when you do everything right, nature sometimes has other plans. The first and most common problem is root rot, caused by a water mold called Phytophthora. This is the #1 killer of avocado trees, and it is almost always caused by overwatering or poor drainage. The symptoms include yellowing leaves, wilting even when the soil is moist, and leaf drop. If you dig down and check the roots, they will be brown and mushy instead of white and healthy. The best treatment is prevention. Make sure your soil drains well, do not overwater, and use that mulch layer we talked about. If you catch root rot early, you can sometimes save the tree by improving drainage, cutting back on water, and applying a phosphonate fungicide. But honestly, prevention is much more effective than treatment. The second problem is salt burn, which shows up as brown, crispy leaf edges. This happens when salts from irrigation water or fertilizer build up in the soil. The solution is deep leaching, running water through the soil for an extended period to flush those salts below the root zone. I do this monthly during the summer months as a preventive measure. Third is sunburn on the trunk and branches. This often happens after heavy pruning, when bark that was previously shaded is suddenly exposed to direct sun. The bark can crack and become an entry point for pests and disease. If you do heavy pruning, consider painting the exposed bark with white latex paint, diluted 50-50 with water. This reflects the sun and prevents burning. Fourth is poor fruit set, despite lots of flowers. We already talked about pollination issues, but this can also be caused by heat stress or cold snaps during flowering. Avocado flowers are sensitive to temperature extremes. There is not much you can do about the weather, but making sure the tree is well watered during flowering and has good pollination partners nearby will help maximize your chances. Fifth is anthracnose, a fungal disease that causes dark, sunken spots on the fruit. This is most common in humid climates or when fruit gets wet frequently. Good air circulation through pruning helps, and you can also apply a copper fungicide if the problem is severe. Remove any affected fruit from the tree and the ground to reduce the spread of spores. Sixth is Persea mite, a tiny pest that causes brown, dead patches on the leaves. If you look closely, you can sometimes see fine webbing on the undersides of the leaves. Persea mites are most active in hot, dry weather. Regularly hosing off the undersides of the leaves can help knock down populations, and neem oil is effective as an organic control. Now for that bonus tip I promised at the beginning, and this one is really going to surprise you. You know that pile of banana peels you throw away every week? Those peels are absolutely loaded with potassium, which is exactly the nutrient your avocado tree needs to set more flowers and develop better fruit. And I am going to show you how to turn those kitchen scraps into a powerful fruit-boosting fertilizer that costs you nothing. Here's what I do. I collect banana peels throughout the week and store them in a container in the freezer. Freezing them breaks down the cell walls and makes the nutrients more available. Once I have 4 or 5 peels saved up, I take them out and let them thaw. Then I chop them up into small pieces, maybe half-inch chunks, and soak them in a gallon of water for about 48 hours. What you end up with is a potassium-rich tea that your avocado tree is going to love. I strain out the banana chunks and pour this tea directly onto the soil around my avocado trees, focusing on the air from about a foot away from the trunk, out to the drip line where the feeder roots are most active. I do this every 2 to 3 weeks during the flowering and fruiting season, which for me is late winter through early summer. The results have been noticeable. Since I started doing this about 3 years ago, I have seen fuller flower clusters, better fruit retention, and noticeably larger fruit at harvest. The potassium helps with water regulation in the plant, which reduces fruit drop during heat waves. It also improves the overall quality and flavor of the fruit. Now those banana chunks you strained out do not go to waste either. I bury them directly in the soil around my trees, about 6 inches deep and a foot or so out from the trunk. As they decompose, they continue to release potassium and other nutrients right into the root zone. It is a slow-release fertilizer that keeps on giving. You can also add other kitchen scraps to your banana peel. Tea. Coffee grounds add a little nitrogen and help acidify the soil slightly, which avocados appreciate. Crushed eggshells add calcium, which helps prevent cell breakdown in developing fruit. I just toss them all in together and let them brew. It smells a bit funky after a couple of days, I will not lie, but your avocado tree does not care about the smell. It just cares about those nutrients. One thing I want to mention is that this banana peel tea is a supplement, not a replacement for your regular fertilizing program. Think of it as a boost during the critical flowering and fruiting window when your tree is working hardest to produce that crop you have been waiting years for. Combined with everything else we have covered in this video, this simple kitchen scrap technique can make a real difference in how much fruit your tree produces. So that is everything you need to know to maximize your avocado yield and finally get fruit instead of just leaves. We covered choosing the right variety, planning for success, watering correctly, fertilizing for fruit production, pruning to keep your tree manageable, understanding pollination, harvesting at the right time, solving common problems, and that bonus banana peel trick. If you follow these steps, you are going to be well on your way to harvesting your own homegrown avocados. If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you get notified when I post new videos. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Do you have any avocado growing tips of your own or questions about something we covered? Drop them down there and I will do my best to answer. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.